The NBA has an anti-vaxxer problem, and before you become too much worried about the anti-vaxxer word, that's actually the correct use of the word according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary. That's the definition of the word anti-vaxxer: a person who is against vaccines and a person who opposes vaccine laws and mandates. And if you're wondering if they changed that this year, that's actually not true. That didn't change this year. That has actually been the definition for quite some time. I believe it was since 2018 or somewhere around there. They first added in the word anti-vaxxer into their dictionary, and that was the definition they had there. You could literally look up on the Internet Archives. There are some websites that archive pages. You could go back and look at the page back in 2018, and that was the definition that was there. However, I am pretty sure back then, when they were speaking about people who opposed vaccines and who opposed vaccination mandates, they weren't referring really to people who opposed the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. They would be talking about people who opposed the mandates that were already there for numerous years, and they were against those mandates, the mandates for all vaccines. And especially those anti-vaxxers back then, those were particularly Facebook groups and over-concerned mothers. But now this whole anti-vaxxer movement has expanded. It includes a lot more people now. And apparently included in the ranks of the anti-vaxxers are some NBA players. Some NBA players are refusing to be vaccinated. And if you only read the stories about it and the stories from a particular view about it, you'd think that these players are just some conspiracy theorists who are afraid of the vaccine for some nebulous reason that they can't quite identify. And they are just being foolish and putting everyone's lives at risk. But if you actually take the time to listen to what they are saying, many of them actually have a point. And they have an interesting point, at least as I see it, on the reality of what do we do with natural immunity versus artificial immunity. So let's get into the news and see exactly what they're saying. If you haven't clicked that like button yet, please do click that like button or tap that like button or punch it or smash it, whichever you prefer. Drop a comment and tell me what you think now or after the video, whenever you want, or even if you have to think on it a little and then come back tomorrow and drop that comment, that's fine by me. But let me know what you think. I do read the comments and they're interesting when they are there. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do click that subscribe button. New videos are coming usually around daily. So, vaccinated NBA staffers concerned about health risks of being exposed to unvaccinated players as season approaches. Though roughly 90% of NBA players are vaccinated as training camp approaches Tuesday, tension exists between those around the league mandated to be vaccinated and the nearly 40 unvaccinated players, league sources told ESPN. In some instances, vaccinated staffers said they're concerned about the health risks of being exposed to unvaccinated players. In others, staffers said they're upset that players aren't facing the same vaccine requirements as most team staff and referees. And in still others, there's animosity toward the league itself for not imposing such a mandate. So we have there three reasons that some of the staffers are angry. The first reason is understandable. Vaccinated staffers said they're concerned about the health risks of being exposed to unvaccinated players. I understand that, but that's not according to the science. Vaccinated people are not at any great health risk from unvaccinated people. The main risk of unvaccinated people is to themselves and risk to society in general by possibly crowding out the hospitals. The risk the vaccinated face is there because we have what is called leaky vaccines where you can still get the disease and there are still breakthrough cases. That's not on the unvaccinated. And I find this whole idea where it seems like we pit the unvaccinated against the vaccinated, it's already creating for some massive problems. And I think it's a result of America's greatest gift to the world. This horrible act they have of turning everything political and getting politics into everything, especially in the last decade or so. They've really done a great job at that. And in this case, when you turn things political, or in the case of politics or religion, they often function the same way. And I find as of late, as religion seems to be lessening around the developed world, it seems like some people are taking politics even in place of their religion and holding on to it with a religious fervor. And the problem with how we deal with politics and religion oftentimes is it's more on an ideological head. This is part of your identity. So it's not on a logical basis. And as I've said before and time again, when you change things to an illogical basis and deal with it on a political side, and then you try to put medicine and science into that, it's going to create for some insanity. All right, but that was their first reason that they didn't want, but that one is understandable, although erroneous. The second reason is staffers said they're upset that players aren't facing the same vaccine requirements as most team staff and referees. Now, I understand that fully, but I believe many people warned about that also when many of these policies were being entertained. The reality is, look at present laws and policies and guidelines in all countries throughout the world. Some laws don't affect some people, and in some countries it's worse than some. And if you create more strict and stringent rules and laws, do you think those are now going to affect the people that haven't been affected before? Look at the Met Gala. Everyone there unmasked and enjoying themselves and laughing and hugging and shaking hands. While if you looked around, and I understand some of the people who may be interested in what goes on in the NBA and who would be interested in what goes on in the Met Gala may hardly ever intersect, but if you looked at it, there was some stuff you could have seen there. The Met Gala that passed a few weeks, 2 weeks or so ago, or was that last week? You look at those people dressed in their ridiculous gowns and they're unmasked and smiling and giddy with the fame, and the people in the background carrying around their gowns like little servants and carrying the food and carrying their ridiculous little accessories. They were all masked. Is that science? Really? Or is that just carrying on from the regular thing we know in society where some people are excluded from some laws? So the more strict you make these laws, it's not going to include these people. It's just going to be stricter on the smaller man, as usual. So the staffers seem like they are shocked at this. Like, oh no, rich millionaires aren't affected by the same laws like we are. Well, surprised? I am not. And the third section also, linked to the one before, is in still others, there's animosity toward the league itself for not imposing such a mandate. And the league responded for that. The league has pushed for mandatory vaccinations for players, league sources said. But as ESPN first reported, the National Basketball Players Association has refused to budge on a vaccine mandate for players, referring to it as a non-starter in negotiations between the league and the players' union. So, a vaccine mandate for the NBA players, in order for it to happen, they need to get an okay from the NBA Players Union. And the union is not giving them that okay. So you could be angry at the league for not imposing it, but the league cannot just impose it. They have a union to face. And as I said in a previous video where I was speaking about our unions here in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular, the school unions. If you look at the schools that are reopening in Trinidad and Tobago, in October, I believe they are planning to reopen it. And there's a strict vaccination policy for students. No student who is unvaccinated can enter the school premises. Of course not. That will be a risk to the student and a risk to the other students and everyone inside of this facility. But excuse me, Mr. Prime Minister, what about the teachers? Well, we have to, get on with the schooling. And the schooling is the important thing here, We can't get tied up in these minor issues. Of course, because there's a teachers' union that they would have to face, and it's going to be difficult to get through to that union. So even as I have my dislike for many unions, and I think many unions are counterproductive, to say it bluntly, I can understand the purpose of it. And you could see the use of it, especially in things like this, where were it not for the union, the associations or the administrators would have bulldozed individual players or individual workers. And if you look at the case of the NBA, especially in the case of the NBA, the money makers are the players. Imagine this. You are in a situation here where the administrators, who are being paid by what these men are doing on the court, are trying to force these men to do what they want. That is kind of ridiculous. And you could understand why it would not work out, because these are the men who make the money. When people turn on the TV and spend their time watching the NBA, when people go to the stadiums and look at the NBA, they don't go there to look at the staffers or to look at Adam Silver. I believe Adam Silver is the current association head. They don't go there to look at the administrators. They go there to look at the players, at the athletes. So the power is in the players' hands, and they are flexing that power. Many of those players are saying, well, we think not. And some of them are speaking just plainly on the side of freedom, where we think it's an issue of freedom, they think it's an issue of freedom, and they don't think it should be up to an administrator to mandate on anyone a personal medical decision. And I can understand that. And even with some of these mandates in the public areas, I think some people aren't recognizing the infringement some of these have. If I have to get a medical exemption for these mandates to go into the safe zones, then when I enter a zone and someone asks me for my vaccination card, I now have to reveal some intimate part of my medical history because I have an exemption. Because when someone walks up to you, can I see your vaccination pass? I have to pull out and say, no, I don't actually have a vaccination pass. I have an exemption. And they're going to, because it's all new, no one knows anything about this. I'm not sure if an exemption pass would exist, or if you'd have to try to explain this, or you pull out your little exemption pass and it has written on it here some. And let's hope it's nothing embarrassing. Some medical condition that, I can actually get the vaccine for because I'm medically exempted. Do we want a society like that? Drop that in the comments. Tell me if you think that's a positive for our society, and if you think it could actually function that way. But that was on a side note. The players themselves spoke for themselves, and many of them explained actually pretty clearly what they want and what is the problem they are having with the mandates.
Jonathan, Josh Robbins with The Athletic. What is it about the vaccine that makes you hesitant to get it?
I would start with, I've had COVID in the past, and so our understanding of antibodies, of natural immunity has changed a great deal from the onset of the pandemic, and is still evolving. I understand that the vaccine would help if you catch COVID, and you'll be able to have less symptoms from contracting it. But with me having COVID in the past and having antibodies with my current age group and physical fitness level, it's not necessarily a fear of mine. Taking the vaccine, like I said, it would decrease my chances of having a severe reaction, but it does open me up to the, albeit rare chance, but the possibility of having an adverse reaction to the vaccine itself. I don't believe that being unvaccinated means infected, or being vaccinated means uninfected. You can still catch COVID with or without having the vaccine. I would say, honestly, the craziness of it all.
And many people are latching on to that bit he said, where it's not a fear of his because of his age and his fitness level, etc., etc. But that wasn't said in a vacuum, firstly. He spoke about already having acquired natural immunity. And secondly, that is a reality. Many people are angry because when people mention this, that if you are young, fit and healthy, the effects of COVID are less on you. And if you use that as an excuse for not wanting the vaccine, many people are very angry with you because we must all bear the burden together. But in this case, where the burden side is already borne by me having natural immunity, then when it comes to my personal health, if I am a fit, young, healthy person, I don't see the problem there. And I think the player was speaking correctly, and he was speaking with the science. I don't know how many of you followed up. I spoke about this before, this study coming out of Israel, where after 6 months they found people who had natural immunity, I believe, were 13 times less likely to get COVID than those who had artificial immunity. 13 times, that's a pretty large difference. And I believe it was somewhere around 27 times more likely if you had artificial immunity than if you had natural immunity. You were 27 times more likely with artificial immunity to be symptomatic when you get this when you get COVID. So if you're talking about spreading, if you're talking about being afraid of an unvaccinated person spreading this to you, a vaccinated person, and we're thinking about how COVID spreads, how nearly any virus spreads. The majority of spreading is through the symptoms, by coughing, sneezing, or whatever, but getting that air from that infected air with the viral particles out of you into someone else. So if someone who is vaccinated is 27 times more likely to be symptomatic than someone who has natural immunity, then the person with natural immunity should actually be more trusted in public spaces than people who are vaccinated. Shouldn't that be it? Shouldn't that be according to the science? And if there are ways for us to test and prove that someone has the antibodies and is naturally immune, shouldn't that be something that we balance also? Shouldn't there be some way that we can show, hey, I have natural immunity, and that gives me just as much a pass, or probably even a superior pass, to someone with artificial immunity? But the counterbalance to the natural immunity would be the booster shots. That, okay, yes, you may have natural immunity and it may have higher efficacy than the first 2 shots of the Pfizer vaccine, but there are booster shots. And if you get the booster shot, then you'd be even more protected than the natural immunity. And even if you have natural immunity and you get another shot on top of that, then you would be even more protected, and that is also true. But I think that should be a personal choice. If I'm already as protected as a vaccinated person, you can't mandate for me to become extra protected. That is nonsense. That doesn't make any kind of sense, that you can mandate for me to be super protected. That doesn't really add up. If you want to say that you're mandating for everyone to have some kind of general protection that increases the populace protection, that's still a better argument. But mandating my super protection doesn't add up. But the booster shots are there, and the booster shots are part of the arguments for that. And I think, though, when you're going down the line of insisting, if you're telling me that I must mandatorily take these first 2 shots, then I must mandatorily take this booster shot, it starts to look a bit suspicious. It starts to feel like if you're trying to hook me onto the fishing line, and I start to question who benefits from it. And especially when you add in this US gift to politicize everything, where you look at, and that's a lot of where the international news you see comes from. You look at a lot of what is happening there, and it doesn't quite seem to add up. I was looking, the US president recently received, because he's one of the at-risk group, he received his booster shot, televised, live, from a room, and it looked like one of those pristine rooms inside of the White House, beautiful trees outside, and a nurse there, he rolls up his long sleeve and she injects him with it. But then you get a shot from away, and you recognize it's a set, like a movie set. And the windows are fake, the background is fake, the pillars in the room are fake. But why? Why isn't he in the White House getting that shot? Or if he is not there, why don't you just show where he is and take it? I think the staging of some of these things are relics of times gone long ago, where you had the ability to control the narrative much easier. You could have shown this one image and everyone believes it. But now when I can just go online and see this image and see that it is well staged, it doesn't add up. And then when you look at the comments, go look at the comments. If you're on Twitter, go look at the comments under pictures like this and see what many people are saying. It doesn't engender for trust. If you think about it rationally, if you're faking the picture, it could nearly feel like you'd be faking. And I don't necessarily believe that, but I could understand how some people will. And the issue of natural versus artificial immunity isn't just an argument that is happening online. It has actually reached the courts, at least in the United States, and hopefully down here, before we reach to the point where it may reach the courts, one of our leaders and administrators will be able to look out and see that something could be done here. NCLA represents COVID-19 survivors in class action lawsuit against Michigan State University vaccine mandate. Gianna Norris is a supervisory administrative associate and fiscal officer at Michigan State University. She has naturally acquired immunity to COVID-19 after recovering from the virus late last year. However, the university has threatened disciplinary action, even termination, if she and other employees do not comply with the school's mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policy. Ms. Norris is challenging Michigan State's unconstitutional COVID directives for the fall 2021 semester. Ms. Norris has fully recovered from COVID-19 and 2 recent antibodies tests demonstrate her robust immunity to reinfection. This status also means that Ms. Norris does not pose a threat to anyone else in Michigan State community. Her immunologist, Dr. Human Nurchasm, has advised her that it is medically unnecessary to undergo vaccination at this point. Yet, if Ms. Norris follows her doctor's advice and elects not to take the vaccine, she faces adverse disciplinary consequences from her employer. And that's another problem. One of the things with vaccine mandates is if something like that, something medical is mandated, and I go see my doctor, and my doctor says, I don't think that's a good idea, but it's mandated by my job or by the politicians. What happens then? A medical choice that I should be making with my medical provider is now being mandated by my job place or by the politicians in a country. I understand there are other things that are like that, but I also have a problem with the whole idea of precedent sometimes. Just because something was done before isn't automatically an argument that, hey, we did it before, so obviously we could do it again. No, there are many things that were done before that weren't proper and were allowed because some people were ignorant, some people didn't know it happened, or some people didn't know how to change it, or many people were just evil. So it happening before isn't automatically a reason. I think the logical argument has to be remade. If you want to do something, you have to remake that argument and convince people again, because also it's not the same people that existed at the first time that exist now. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly where that court case leads and who actually benefits in the end. And that's the question to me. Who benefits? When I am seeing these mandates and the mandates seem to be pushing further on, my question is, who benefits? Listen, if my country, Trinidad and Tobago, mandated the Sinopharm vaccine, I would be less concerned. If they mandated the Sputnik vaccine, I would be less concerned. And they mandated booster shots of each, I'd be less concerned than if they mandate the Pfizer vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine is from a for-profit pharmaceutical company that is currently facing some court cases over some already morally grey things they have done and some outright pretty evil things they have done too. And if you're telling me that you're going to mandate this medication from this company, that the company is saying you should take and you may need to continuously take every 6 months, I am going to start to squint at this, because they have a vested interest in making sure everyone keeps taking their shot, and they are making money from this. And as was said, to make it mandatory when there is natural immunity going on doesn't really make sense to me. The efficacy of natural immunity, something I was reading earlier. Some people who got the SARS coronavirus way back in the early 2000s are still showing immunity and antibodies some 20 years later to that virus. And some of them who got the SARS coronavirus in the early 2000s are some nearly 20 years later showing that they actually have immunity to the COVID-19 virus also, still years later from natural immunity. So when we're talking about mandating this for-profit medication from a big pharmaceutical company, it makes me squint. It makes me squint. And I'm not the only one. I saw recently the Mexican president is also squinting. The Mexican president has some questions, especially when it comes to vaccinating young children. And right now, Pfizer is assiduously working at getting that FDA approval to allow for children under 12 to be vaccinated. And the Mexican president isn't having it. He has no interest in it. And this story is from a couple months back, but interestingly enough, I didn't see a lot of it being covered in the Western media. I actually got this story from Russia Today, Russian media. Mexico won't be hostage to Big Pharma, president says, as internet predicts trouble after country rejects COVID jabs for kids. Social media users have theorized that President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador could face severe repercussions after he refused to purchase COVID-19 vaccines for children, vowing that Mexico wouldn't bow to pressure from drug firms. In remarks made earlier this week, the Mexican leader said his government was still waiting for the scientific community to demonstrate the benefits of vaccinating minors. Until conclusive evidence was provided, Mexico would refuse to purchase jabs for children. Obrador announced, adding that pharmaceutical companies seem to be focused more on making profits than on ensuring medical necessity as they rake in record sales from COVID-19 vaccines. This is a quote from him. Mexico will not be held hostage by pharmaceutical companies that only want to do business and scare children with the idea that it is necessary to vaccinate against COVID-19. That's the Mexican president. I didn't say that in case YouTube is looking to strike that. He was similarly critical of plans by drug companies to introduce third or even fourth dose booster shots, opining that the jabs could be superfluous. And I understand that opinion he has. It does raise interest when you have pharmaceutical companies who stand to benefit from this and who we know are not against doing some evil things. Let's not try to cover it by any other thing. Some evil things. We know they are not against doing it to get their profits up. It makes you wonder when you're seeing these pharmaceutical companies and their drug is the one that should be mandated and we should be taking it every 6 months. Everyone in the world, even the children who actually have a pretty low risk of getting and of falling ill from getting the virus. It doesn't seem to add up. But tell me, what do you think? Do you think that there should be something done about the natural immunity and we should have some way to tell it? Or do you think that we're all worried for nothing? Everyone get vaccinated. Don't even bother about it. If you were vaccinated before and they ask for it again, stop questioning. Just go get your vaccine. What's the worry? It's just a vaccine. What's the worst that could happen, you know? And do you agree that these NBA players are being disobedient and they should be punished for it? Because right now, I think there are 2 NBA players who may not be able to play home games because of their unvaccinated status. Do you think that they should be punished for this? Tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you again tomorrow for the next video.
Feel the music, rising with the tide.